Good.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Homefront podcast. Today I'm joined with John Flynn. If you don't know him, but you should, he's a pretty big YouTuber. He's got about 19,000 subscribers. He's known as the Real Estate Bear, the only real estate agent who doesn't tell you to buy 24/7, and you're going to miss out on the next big thing. But anyways, John, welcome to the show, and we're super grateful to have you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm just drinking my tea here, so don't mind me. And was sneezing a bit before I got on. It's allergy season. So other than that, yeah, thanks for having me. And I can't wait to get into the discussion here.
Oh, 100%. What's going on with the Monopoly backboard? What's that trying to
Uh,
insinuate?
it was either that or flames today. So I figured I'd tone it down with the Monopoly. Actually, I've used it in my YouTube videos, but if you look on Twitter, Elon Musk just posted something and it was like the rules of Monopoly. And it was actually it was so cool because um it said something. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it said when the bank runs out of money, if you're playing Monopoly, you just write pieces of paper and pretty much print your own money. He's like, it's pretty much what happens right now, right? They just make
Yeah.
stuff up as we go. So I found it very fascinating that, but I've used the Monopoly background in one of my videos previously, so it was on my Zoom backgrounds that I can just click on, right? So
Yeah, no, I love it. That's cool. I definitely try to study currencies. I'm kind of early in my economic days where like I'm trying to understand stuff from like Ray Dalio and I watch a lot of Bloomberg, just listening to some economists there and getting their take, and then even your take too. So I love to see different sides of the real estate market, the bulls and the bears. Except I'm kind of at this point right now where the bulls aren't quite making sense anymore. If that makes sense. I do own property, but I do rent my primary, and it's just
mhm.
based off if I was to buy this place, it would cost me about I over 5 grand a month, and to rent it, it costs 3,500 a month. And a lot of people are going to say, well, you're not getting any pay down. I do get pay down on another property, so I have some exposure to the market. I guess it's just I feel like Canadians over the last couple decades with low interest rates, with HELOCs, have just honestly gone all in on real estate. Like they've just really taken all their wealth and they've really put it into, buying a rental property, getting a duplex, buying a second home. And now with the HELOCs going up, and interest rates rising, it feels like there's still some sentiment out there that you should buy now because prices are low. I have a long-winded question here, but what do you think? Like, what would you do right now if you were a real estate investor or even a first-time buyer?
So I think you're right. The key word there in your question was sentiment, right? And it's all about the sentiment in the market. So we've had this, buy real estate only goes up, and for the most part, it's been true. As long as you go back only so far. If you go back further, then it becomes untrue. Especially when you get into the late '80s and into the '90s, it was very flat. It actually decreased, and it was flat for like a decade. In Alberta, actually, I was just talking to an agent in Alberta, Amy Schmidt, and in Edmonton, it's been flat. It was flat for like 10 years until they started having their boom now. And of course, you talk about oil prices and all the rest of that. But I think, there's a lot of buzzwords and key sayings and stuff out there right now, and there always has been. And it's like, real estate only goes up, and don't it's time in the market, not timing the market. And yeah, there could be truth to that, but you can't say there's not truth to the other side of that argument or debate too. To say if you bought if you buy at the peak or near the peak, you're going to need a lot more time in the market than someone that bought after the peak or prior to the peak with within many years. And so I guess, and for the people that are upside down too in their payments, and there's many investors and speculators out there that have bought with no intentions of ever cash flowing or even being cash neutral on a property, and they are upside down and they're waiting it out. So how long can they wait it out with negative cash flow? And I'm not talking a few $100s, I'm talking thousands of dollars for many of them. And is it like, when do you decide to pull the plug on it? So I think that if it makes sense to invest in a property, it makes sense. But the sense shouldn't be, well, this property, it doesn't make sense, but it's going to go up. Well, that's speculation, right? And that's um, it's reckless speculation, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that, if the numbers don't make sense, like for you, and I say it all the time, I put this out there on Twitter. Actually, it got like 2.6 million views, and it was just like your situation, where it was like, rent for this much, which was like, a third or two-thirds or half the price of owning. And people went crazy over this post because it's true, and you're living evidence there that it's not worth buying the property you live in; it's worth renting it. So I think that it all comes down to the numbers. Like, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. And the market hasn't made sense for a while. And the only thing that would make it make sense is future speculation that they would go up, but the economy can't sustain it going up. So it's just all BS. And again, it comes back to the sentiment. Sooner or later, the sentiment's going to change, and it is changing, but we still do have a lot of bullish people in the market because of what we've seen. It's like you get used to it, right? And you get used to I call it depends which side of the relationship you're on, but it's the abusive relationship, right? And unfortunately, the speculators and the investors are the perpetrator or the abusers, and the first time buyers or the families out there are the ones getting abused, or the victims. And we kind of just accept it after a while. Well, I just can't afford it, and prices are going to be this high forever. But we are seeing the sentiment change, and I think that's a major part of it. And it takes time for it to change, and it's going to take a lot of pain too. Which, and when I make my predictions, mine aren't just like I predict this because oil prices are going to go up one day or down. It's all based on historical data on what happens in cycles, and you can't argue like the numbers. It always plays out the same. Unemployment rises. It's very basic, right? Stuff that I'm talking about. I'm not a genius. I look at the numbers. Before I got on this call today, I'm like looking at numbers of listings to sale ratios and things like that, which is it's a fascinating thing was just looking at this morning. But that's what it is. It's very just simple, basic mathematical, concepts that happen, and with markets, and they always play out the same way, right? And the interest rates are, of course, the key driver for most things. And it's not that interest rates go up to cool the market; it's just that they were too low, and they spurred all this aggressive speculation and investment. And it's like a college kid with a credit card, right? You get your first credit card, and this is what it's been like. So my advice to I don't really have much advice for investors besides, like, if you're like well, don't speculate. For one, the speculation days are over because prices aren't going up, and we've already, or you or whoever, has been rewarded too much because of low interest rates environments. So like those days are over. Like, you can see that it's been over since 2021. Before, for some people, I've seen people that have bought in 2019 pre-construction condos, and they're upside down when it's closing because of the interest rates and stuff. So those days are over. If you're an investor, and that's the problem. Smart investors, they can't. They're not purchasing or building places right now because it doesn't make sense. So we have, again, speculative investors. So that's not a good idea anymore. And first time buyers, like if you're a high income earner, sure, like buy a house, whatever, but just don't get in over your head. And everyone's different if you have a good down payment and stuff. But be prepared that prices are going to go down because the cycle says that we're not in the uptrend anymore. We're entering the downward phase, and unemployment and the rates. That's another thing, right? We can get into the rates, but they've been due to go down for, I don't know, 6 months now, and they
Yeah.
haven't gone down yet, and they keep pricing them into the market. But again, this is you know. I could have told you that because I've studied the rates, and it's 12 to 18 months from the last hike till they start cutting. And we've only been 12 months as of June next month. So that would be the earliest they would cut. And it doesn't look like they're going to cut now. And they've been saying they were going to cut since January or March at this point. Well, the cycle, the historical data doesn't say that. It doesn't dictate that. It dictates 12 to 18 months or 12 to 24 months, depending on the country, I guess, and the situation. So that was a pretty long-winded answer for your so supposedly long-winded
No,
question.
no, it was good. It was great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. There's a few things that I definitely want to touch upon. I think that just quickly here with rates, what people don't understand is that when rates fall, that means that the economy is not good. That means that the economy, like, and well, give me an example. Well, COVID, right? The world shut down and they dropped rates to zero because the economy was not good. People weren't out. It wasn't being productive. That's another topic of conversation as to why real estate prices are probably seeing a huge jump was because of, artificial inflation. But anyways, um, what I really want to touch upon that I always heard my whole career, like when I first got into real estate, all the big wigs, all I ever did was go to the office and just sit there and listen to people. It got a little better because I didn't have to go to the office anymore because I could just go online and dissect that information myself now. But at the time, everyone talked about the I word, immigration. Everyone. Immigration is going to push prices up. And in 2017, I lived in Oakville, Ontario. I'm still from there. So if you could
Mhm.
imagine, I was kind of on this cusp of when I grew up and went to high school, it was very much like white predominant. It was like upper class, white families. There wasn't a lot of minorities. And then what we saw was a bunch of Asian culture come to Oakville and start buying up real estate, right? You'd have this 17-year-old, 18-year-old living in this $2 million house because the high school I went to ranked really high on the Fraser Institute,
Mhm.
and then they'd go into the BMW shop and they'd buy a
Mhm.
BMW with 300K cash. And I started noticing these things, and I'd always look at the bottom of the MLS system and see it was a Chinese agent who sold the home. And I was always just in my head like, how is this happening? Right? Like, how are people coming from another country and bringing so much money to Canada and buying these homes with cash? Right? Like, I heard of one guy bought 5 homes on the same street, and this is a residential area, but just to
Mhm.
rent them out. And as I've been like studying and understanding it a bit more, it's just getting their money out of a dangerous currency and out of a dictatorship country and putting it into a country. And people would argue with me that Canada is now a dictatorship. I don't think so, but a little bit of it. So it depends on what social media site you're
Certain
on.
parts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And anyways, they're bringing in all this money, and now there's this fentanyl crisis in Vancouver, and then there's the triads, and there's Sam Cooper, who was a former reporter, saying that they're bringing in fentanyl, they're making a huge profit, and then they're putting it back into Vancouver real estate, and that's a big reason for the run up. Now, with Canadian prices being so high and Canada not being an attractive country, I guess, unless you're laundering the money in terms of tax provisions, is immigration going to stay high? Now, there is a lot of immigration with students. There's a lot of immigration with people who actually do want to come here and try and make a living. But I talk to a lot of people even at my gym. I'll just be talking in the sauna, and some guy, he's from Russia, and he pops in and goes, "I'm only here because I'm trying to get the Canadian passport, and then I'm out of here because I don't want to go to war. Because when I go to travel to another country, my visa costs 20x more than what a Canadian passport would cost." Now, I wonder if the population is going to decline from Canada with people leaving Canada and even it not being an attractive country. So like what's the bullish argument now for real estate?
So I'm an immigrant. So,
Yeah.
and we came here 1988 for a better standard of living, a higher standard of living. We were from Ireland, and it was tough times back then. Now Ireland is like one of the richest, or was one of the richest countries in Europe, in the EU. But and now immigration, open border. So there's like, it seems nowadays it's more of an open border immigration policy in these Western countries, and it's, again, it's without trying to get into too much politics, but it's all driven by the same agenda, this globalist thing where, and it's like certain countries are test subjects, and Canada would be one, right? And Ireland's another. It just so happens to be my country. And I just talked to a new client, or potential new client, yesterday. She had messaged me. She follows me on YouTube, and she had to leave Ireland because of the unaffordability and the mass immigration, and it's just not a safe country anymore. And there's a lot of political things going on there. So, so yeah, Canada. I guess immigration is such a widespread kind of topic, and it's like, okay, how does it affect housing? Well, I think that with the you're talking about the laundering, the drug money laundering and stuff. I think it probably obviously still happens, because even just recently they charged, or fined the casino here in Niagara for um it was some sort of money laundering, or not doing their job. Someone came in with $80,000 in a grocery bag and cashed them into chips and didn't even gamble and left. And The casino didn't even say anything. So how many times has this happened? And they got busted. So someone ratted that worked at the casino was like, this isn't right. But how many times has this happened? And of course, we know this was happening in Vancouver years and years ago, and they were buying property with it. So yeah, Canada is known, and I don't know the details or how it's known that well, but it's known for a place to launder your money and buy property, and it's kind of like a safe haven for. And then we say, well, it's is it the people taking their money away from dictatorships, or is it criminals that are taking them? Maybe they're not taking their money from the dictatorships. Maybe those are the criminals that the dictators are going to throw in jail if they get busted, and it's just easier to bring it here. Maybe the government's involved. Who knows? But I think that's one issue. But then the other issue is the levels of immigration that the government has recently, you know, gone to, where we're a million people a year or more, depending on who you talk to, and so many are temporary residents. So, and I think there's a lot of misconception, or there's that's usually the counter argument when it comes to house prices being sustained. And I've just heard it multiple times on the last day because I put something on Twitter, and the responses were, well, we're going to see a floor under the housing prices because of immigration. And I think that some people associate immigrants with like the rich Chinese people that, buy the $300,000 car for their kids and in Oakville, and the rest of the immigrants, which the majority are regular people with regular jobs that can't afford these homes either. Because I meet with them. I meet with these people making $250,000 a year, and they're like looking at a townhouse and thinking, well, should we do this, or why? And I talk to them and I say, well, how much are you paying now? And they're paying like 2,500 or whatever it is a month, and it's like now they're going to be paying 3,500 to 4,000 a month to own a place with a huge down payment too. So and they're in no rush, the people I talk to buy a house, because again, affordability, immigration is one thing, but affordability is another thing, and they don't go hand in hand. Just because you bring in a million people doesn't mean that they're all going to be able to afford homes, and that's just a ploy by the government to temporarily prop up the economy. And yeah, long term maybe it will help with the economy, but it's I call it modern day human trafficking, because they're literally bringing people to prop up GDP. And they say this like this is not a secret. It's you go look at you go read the immigration minister's website, and it says it was very clear their immigration targets are tied to the Canadian GDP and prosperity and keeping the economy going. So, but again, at the same time, we're having this issue with, yes, we're not building enough homes in the last couple of years. We did prior to that, but of course they were all snatched up by investors and speculators. But again, affordability and immigration are two separate issues. And just because we increase immigration, unless they're all drug dealers and traffickers that are laundering money, then they will prop up the prices. But they're obviously not propping up the prices now. What's still propping up the prices is uh, the locomotive that we're still trying to slow from all the money printing, which is happening. It's actually this year is probably going to be the year, and I've called for this a few years ago, that's going to really slow the economy. And this is when things are going to change. And this is when interest rate cuts will probably start to happen. And again, as you just mentioned, like people, this is not a good thing when they cut interest rates, right? You'll look at the historical stats on that. It's usually recessionary times, or it's always recessionary times, and higher unemployment. So yeah, that's what I think about immigration. It's just it's an unfortunate thing that the government has put promise, and you hear a lot of stories about these promises that were made by Canada, and the people come here and they were lied to, right? And they're sending students home in body bags every week, because they can't get a job, or they can't afford to live here. So I think there's a big shock for the immigrants, and I feel bad that for many of them have been misled. So anyway, that's what I think about immigration.
Yeah, no, you made some great points there. Misled is just such a big word that I can't even comprehend. I just feel like overpromised and underdelivered is kind of what Canada is right now.
Yeah.
I live in Toronto, so I walk by homeless people every block, and you always just kind of wonder, what went wrong there, and could be anything, right? Addiction to drugs, cost of living, giving up hope, a bad breakup, like you just don't know. I guess, yeah, just quickly here, drugs being legal in Vancouver, it just seems like a very bad failed experiment, and then them trying to do it this way. I know in Niagara, you definitely see
Yeah.
it too. You see the how addictive these drugs can be. It's just really, really crazy. And it feels like as COVID has gone on, and like you said, the money printing happened and interest rates were ultra low and they took so long to raise them and they should have done it quicker. And I guess everything's hindsight, but it feels like not only that, but we've kind of created this divide where it's like, let's tax the rich and then that will pay for more programs and different things like that, rather than saying, like, I listen to Kevin O'Leary a lot, love him or hate him, he's a pretty smart guy. And when
Yeah.
he talks about Canada, he talks about if we had a prime minister that treated Canada like a business, we could become more productive. So that GDP number that you just talked about, right, it's 2 quarters of negative GDP is a recession. But if you look at the GDP per capita, what are we, 7 quarters of negative GDP? I think it is.
Yeah.
So if you actually strip away immigration, yeah, we've been in a recession for a long time. But if you start to ramp up natural resources, I would think. Now, I'm not an expert, but I would think that would help the economy flourish more. You'd have more jobs, you'd have more people paying tax, and hopefully you could kind of decrease that cost of living by not having a carbon tax. I'm not sure your side on the carbon tax, but I always just think of how can we make Canada not as expensive, right? Like we're ruled by oligopolies, and I feel it every day. I'm looking at my credit card. I'm like, how did I get here? And I do pretty well for myself. I'm not trying to be
Mhm.
egotistical or anything like that, but I wonder what it's like to make 60, 70 grand and try and live in this economy.
Yeah. So we're talking about like we've come to a place where, and you hear people talk about it that know about finances and the economy and stuff, where the government, of course, now with the jobs, like our public sector jobs have increased. They're like 52% of, in however long, I forget the exact stat, but of course, but this is what the government does to prop up jobs numbers, and then the tax. So we are just getting more and more tax. And I was actually going to do a video on it, but I'm like, no, it's not real estate focused. So I'm not going to do it because I'm not just going to go off on some tangent. But we have, yeah, so the carbon tax. Well, you know, and this is they're pulling at your emotional strings, the government here, because you're like, save the environment and stop the forest fires. And of course, who doesn't want that, right? Like legitimately, but it's just a tax. Like it's not going to do anything. It's going to put more money in the government's pocket. And I said, even myself, I said, look, how can I become carbon neutral as a business, right? Just again, I'm not even, I hate that whole, I try to fight against what's happening because I don't believe that it's a solution. But I said, if I wanted to, and how do I be a good agent or a good business owner here? And I work from home, so I really don't have a carbon footprint beside my vehicle. I've done the whole electric vehicle thing. Anyway, I don't like the electric vehicles. I had one. I owned one, but I have a hybrid and whatever, and I have a truck. I like my truck. I'm from Niagara. What can I say? So I think I produce what 5 tons or something of CO2 a year, and it's what $50 a ton, or it went up. It was like I could pay the government or some company that you can buy carbon credits from, like some tree management company, not even a tree planting. I could pay someone to literally go take care of some trees for me that aren't even mine, and I get carbon credits, or I could just pay the government $50 a ton or whatever the number is. I can't remember. So for like $300 or so, I could be carbon neutral. Like, how does that fix the environment? It doesn't fix anything. Another thing was, again, with property taxes, all the property taxes are going up, but I would say to most people, or I would expect most people would say to me, like, my services aren't getting better in my town or my region. My taxes went up, but it's not like the place is a mess. There's garbage everywhere. And then two places by my house have those speed cameras. And these speed cameras, for 3 kilometers over, you're getting a ticket. A cop won't even give you a ticket for like 10 over, most cops, unless you're like blatantly in a school zone and there's flashing lights everywhere. So why, this is not helping people. There's nobody, no kids were killed in front of this school, these two schools. They're doing it strategically to collect tax dollars for the region. So we're getting taxed, even parking. We used to be able to go to parks around here and just get out and go to the park. Everywhere charges parking now. You can't go to the beach without paying for parking. And it's because the government's need that there's more and more requirement for the government's getting bigger. There's more people. We're doing less. And this is another thing. The government employees are, there's probably a lot of them out there. So I better watch what I say because it's like, they're so angry they have to go back into an office. But, and I don't know the reason why, but because Canada doesn't produce, we're not a productive country where our productivity is way down. So, and again, you have to produce something. You can't just produce nice words and make money, right? Maybe on YouTube you can, but like that's not sustainable. You have to produce something as a country. And Canada is like anti-productive right now. We're like, no natural resources. Like that's what we have. And as you say, Kevin O'Leary says we're the richest country in the world, but we got this dumbest leaders that want to block everything. So we need to, and we produce like the clean oil and gas. Like oil and gas isn't going anywhere. Go drive, go drive in Toronto or wherever. There's cars everywhere. Then they're not electric cars. They're regular cars, and people aren't buying. People are buying less electric cars now because they realize the limitations of the electric cars. Just like my electric lawnmower. I had to go like cut, with my son. He wanted to go, we have to go cut a couple other pieces of grass. Man, you talk about range anxiety in a car. Try cutting lawns with an electric lawnmower and you'll get anxiety, range anxiety. Because and then it takes you hours to charge the thing up. So again, it's like common sense. Like, okay, what do people want? I just want to fill it up and forget about it. Like that's it, right? And yeah, I don't want a gas guzzler, but I want to go 1,000 kilometers on a tank of gas. But again, the government doesn't have a real solution, and they don't have the infrastructure for these electric vehicles. There's no alternative for these cars. They're like, well, we're going to tax you, so you stop using as much carbon producing items, whatever. So okay, well, how do I heat my house?
Hmm.
Like, I have a furnace. Well, you just don't use it as much, or get something else. Okay, what else am I going to get? A heat pump and they don't work under. My neighbor has one. My neighbor got a heat pump because their air conditioner, oh, they didn't have one when they bought it. So they got a heat pump for the air. And even around here in this mild winter, the thing froze up in the winter. Like, and
Yeah.
can you imagine? Like, so it's a backup system or it's a system that works a lot of the time, but when it gets really cold, it's not going to work. So now you need two systems. So we're producing more, or we're consuming more, I should say. We don't produce more, we produce less. So we are a consumer-based economy, and that's what we've seen with the debt levels. More debt, we can consume more, but we produce nothing compared to what we consume. And so when it comes to the environment and the carbon tax and all this, I say, and sorry, back up. The solution for everything, the solution for the carbon tax is change your ways and go buy an electric car. And in your house, you're like, well, I got a problem with this. And using, my wife says, well, let's go buy this. It's always buy something. Why do you have to buy? Because we've been taught if you have a problem, just go buy something and that'll fix it. You're depressed, go buy some, go shopping. You're like depressed people, they rack up their credit cards. Actually, even when you're not depressed, people just rack up their credit cards nowadays. So consumption, and we were taught reduce, reuse, recycle. So where's the reduce gone? Now it's just consume and I don't know, recycle or something. Like it's changed because we can't, if we stop consumption, the economy stops, and that's the government can't do that. So the government ultimately doesn't care about carbon tax and carbon emissions. They care about keeping the economy going and looking like they're doing what they can to have the best of both worlds, a low carbon environment or economy, but an economy. And to me, I say no, reduce your consumption, and and increase production of things that people need. And that's how we'll figure things out. But right now we're doing the opposite. We're just consuming more than we're producing. And that the only way to continue doing that, as we've seen, is with credit, right? And we've just done it. So we're like a debt-based economy. And the only thing that can keep it going is the debt, because they know we got to cut rates because these people got it. We got to, it's not because they have debt. It's because, well, we need to get them more debt,
Mm.
right? So yeah, we're all debt slaves. And even me, I'm not a debt slave, but I am, because now I have to pay the exorbitant prices because, of inflation, right? So regardless, if you don't have a lot of debt, you're still subject to the issues from debt. I think you mentioned about yeah, taxing the rich, right? Now the rich, their net worth is, tripled and quadrupled or whatever the case may be for the individuals. So yeah, of course now they're going to say, well, we're gonna tax the rich now. Well, you just handed the rich everything they ever wanted. They increased asset prices and inflation. That's who benefits the rich.
Yeah.
And now they're going to tax them. But so I wanted to do like a pie chart. So all these paper gains that people have out there, and on real estate. We'll talk about real estate. If you actually think about it, with that increase in capital gains, and whatever, it's could be a lot to some people, could not matter. But and I see it with people. They don't want to sell because they don't want to pay tax. Because they know so much. Well, I'm gonna have to pay tax, so they just keep it. So, but regardless, at some point in time, that the government owns a piece of that house because of tax or a piece of your assets. So you're gonna have to figure it out, right? And some people say, well, I can just take the equity out and buy other stuff. Well, they're gonna own pieces of that other stuff if it goes up in value. So anyone that thinks they're not going to pay tax on capital gains or just because they're not going to sell, it's always there. It's part of that paper wealth that you have. It's whatever part of the pie it is, it's always going to be there. And you have to think like that's the government say, okay, I got $300,000 equity in my investment property. Well, so much is the government. It's not going to change. It's not like it's going to go away one day. So whether you pay them now or pay them later, it really doesn't matter.
That's interesting. Oh, that makes sense. I wanted to ask you, is there a way, what did you buy your house for roughly, if you don't mind sharing,
So
in 2004? Is that kind of when
so
you probably bought it before then, I assume,
I
actually.
bought it. No, I bought it in 2005.
Okay.
So when I started real estate, sorry, I'm just logging back in my computer. When I started real estate, I did many things like a like technical guy, but I was ended up as a cable guy before I was a realtor. And anyway, after a year of that, I was like, all right, I got to quit this. But I saved up and I could have bought a house. And I said, I could buy a house and keep being a cable guy, which I hated, or just put my down payment that I had saved up into starting my real estate career and take a chance that maybe it's going to work, maybe it won't, right? Because I know it was a tough gig. It was self-employed. I had never been self-employed before. So yeah, so '05. So I'm like selling these houses in the first year and I never owned a house, which is not that abnormal, right? It happens, right?
I did it too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I would say, well, people say like when I first started, they would say, "How long have you been in real estate?" And I'd say, like in your first few months, oh, I've lived in a house my whole life. I'd say stupid stuff like that because what are you gonna say, right? It's my first
Yeah.
month.
You're my first
Um,
deal.
yeah, you're my first deal, right? My buddy was my first deal, and he knew it, and he was like fired some Remax agent. He's like, "Let's get it," because they didn't sell his house, and he was mad at them. Um, so yeah, so I bought my first time buyer house, which I've never moved from. I want to move, but I won't move now because I'm not buying into the market, right? I'm not going to have
Yeah.
a $3,000 a month mortgage payment. Meanwhile, being mortgage free for so long, it's like no, I'm not buying into this market. So when the market happens, when it transitions, when we go through our low cycle, I'm gonna look. I'm an opportunist when it comes to housing because I couldn't care less about housing. I don't care. I care about cars. I love cars. I'm passionate about cars. I waste all sorts of stupid money on cars. But houses, I don't care. Couldn't care less personally, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I paid $128,000. The market was hot,
How
by the
much were
way.
you making? How much were you making?
Um, Now I made that was in my second year, and that was a really good year because that was '05, and that was '08 was like the peak. Well,
Yeah.
'07 was probably the peak,
Right.
and '08. So yeah, so I made like I want to be accurate because it was probably around 75,000, not included because back then it was just like, oh, I made 85,000, but it was included HST and whatever. But yeah,
Mhm.
probably $75,000. But that was big money in Niagara,
So
right?
not
I was
even, yeah, yeah. Niagara doesn't have much, but not even 2x income. You kind of bought your house for, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, it was, and now I was single, and I first thing I did was renovate my basement because I rented my basement, and so my mortgage and my property tax was $707 a month, and I was paying 4.5% or whatever, right?
Back then.
Because interest rates started going up when I bought it because before again part of the cycle before 2008 before the financial crisis, which we got off easy on, interest rates went up. Um, of course. So, and I had a variable rate in the beginning, and of course, I was like, "Oh no, I shouldn't have done this." So I locked in. but yes, and then I rented my basement for $700 a month. So I was, I just had to pay the bills. But again, I was single
Yeah.
and I was in real estate and like,
You're smart. Yeah.
yeah,
Back
it
then
was
you were smart.
tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
tough. So
It's still tough. Still, I'm not discounting that. I guess my point is, um, that's, 2x income. Let's say, what's the median income in Canada? 80 rand,
oh geez, who knows? They don't
something
put
like
this
that.
number out. Yeah, it's around. It's honestly it's less, but
Yeah.
say 80. Yeah, say 80 for you're talking. So that's
Blanket
like
statement.
family. That's like
Yeah.
family.
Family
That's like
money. Yeah.
that's
Yeah. You have a family, you
household
got
income is 80
two
grand.
incomes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the average house? Over 700,000?
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
just around that 700 now. Yeah, give or take for
So how does Canada get back to now? I'm not saying 2x income. I think that's those days are long gone and never
no.
coming back. Maybe 4x, 5x. Is that too crazy to say? What's that? 8, 16, 24, 32, 450. So you're looking at 5, 6x income.
So I
Uh,
so I
you need to go to a
remember,
deep recession. Is that
yeah,
what
so
we need truly?
I remember years ago. This was like not decades ago, but 5, 6 years ago, maybe it was 2017, 2018, reading something, and they were saying like when your um average house to household income ratio hits like over 4%, you're in trouble as a country. And
4%.
over 4x, sorry, over
4x. Sorry.
four x, yeah,
4x.
over 4x, you're getting into dangerous territory. Like five, you're done. Like it's just it's ready to blow up, right? And
Yeah.
this is like a well-written article. I can't remember where it was, but it was talking like globally and like, and of course here we are now. It's whatever, anywhere we fluctuate anywhere between 8 and 10x depending on the season,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
um so yeah, now we will see, and again, part of the inflation, again, I'm not an economist, not an expert, which it's sad because the economists don't get things right. Like all the economists are calling for this and that, and everyone's been wrong. So I guess it really doesn't matter if I was an economist or not. um they've been where were we? Sorry, I
That's
forget what
okay.
we were talking about. I went off on a tangent. My brain goes off on tangents. Oh,
We're
the
just talking about,
affordability.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
just
how do
to
we
get
get back
back to get
to
so
5x income? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, and that's the problem with inflation, right? Why it will be sticky because people are demanding still. Like I don't make enough money, so wages will increase. Of course, wages follow all the rest of the inflation, so everything goes up in price, and then everyone sits around and says, and it makes sense. I need more money now because all these things are more expensive. So I think we're going to see wage inflation, even though I think recently I've heard about wage deflation, but wages have gone up. They will probably continue to go up over the years, and prices will come down. It's not going to be an overnight fix, but of course, we are going to see a recession, and we're going to see some steep price movements down in the average house price in Canada, and it's inevitable. Like to say that house prices have gone down. I understand that the concept that over the long term prices always go up. Like I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to say no, they don't. They're they're lower now than in 1950. Obviously, over long periods of time, prices go up, but prices go down in the interim, right? And that's what we will see. We haven't seen price decreases yet. Like 2022 is like the blow off top that should have never happened because our Tiff Macklem, whose core thing or issue to solve is inflation and maintaining the purchasing power of our Canadian dollar. And I would say he failed at both of those, but everyone looks to him like he's some god. So, so anyway, we shouldn't have had that blow off top because he should have been raising rates prior to them, but he was distracted by the pandemic and the politics and all the rest of this stuff and his promises. But again, I like they're the economists. They know what happens when interest rates are low and when money gets pumped into the economy. We all look again after hindsight and we're like, well, oh, geez, all like they printed all the money, and well, shouldn't an economist know this? Shouldn't they like know these basic fundamentals? It's like after they're like, oh, well, Jesus, we learned our lesson there, and it's like you guys are idiots. Like this guy is like making tons of money as the governor of the Bank of Canada, and this is why like the Pierre Polyev or whatever, he's like, I'm firing this guy because
Yeah.
he didn't do his job. So our purchasing power of the dollar is destroyed. Nobody, we got through this thing where like people didn't even want cash. Cash was always great. People used to say cash is king. And now everyone's like, cash is trash. Like, don't keep cash. Like, so what do you keep then? You keep stuff. I got a radio, I got a TV. Like, you just buy stuff, right?
Yeah,
Like,
stuff.
where so I think now we're getting back to where cash is becoming more valuable, and of course, like people are bragging about I'm making 5% on my high interest savings account. But to get back to, yeah, how do we restore that? Well, it's going to be a price correction, and it's going to be wage increases over 10. It's going to take like probably 5 to 10 years to restore affordability. Now, it will be affordable in certain places like, say, Niagara, prior to it will be in anywhere in the GTA and things like that. But yeah, it'll take time to do it, but it's going to be a combination of, yeah, recession, wage increases in time, in my
So I
opinion.
was listening to somebody talk about this, and it really opens my eyes. I heard, have you heard of Millennial Moron? Have you heard of this guy? You ever
Yeah,
seen?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
He's
I
got
don't know much, but I have heard of it, and I
yeah,
think I've
you should
probably
watch
seen
some of his
something.
YouTube videos. He was talking about people comparing Toronto to New York. And he was like, the comparison is not there. And he's like, because people are always like, well, Toronto prices are so high. Why don't you go look at New York? New York has a better GDP than all of Canada combined. It is the financial hub of the world. If New York fails, the whole economy fails. Then I was
Hmm.
listening to this other guy on Bloomberg talk about it. He was talking about if you're Canadian, you should go get exposure to the US because Canada is propped up on housing prices. And when you are all in on one asset and it takes a huge dump, then the whole economy is going to fail. And everyone says, well, they're not going to let housing fail. They can't let that happen. But then he goes on to say, well, the Canadian economy, the world doesn't really care about it. So if we failed as a nation, right? If the
Hmm.
Canadian economy not failed, but say it took a huge hit, the whole world wouldn't catch the cold. It would still be fine, right? Like
Yeah.
the New York Stock Exchange would hum along. And but like what happened in 2008 when the US failed, because it's the global economy, the whole world feels it. It ripples through. So it was interesting to kind of understand that because I was of this mindset for so long. And I'm not going to try and make a prediction on Canadian real estate. I find it way too hard. But I was of this mindset that the government will never let this fail, right? Like even when you see banks extending amortizations, I was like, they're artificially keeping this alive. Because realistically, what I think should happen is that they should keep rates higher for longer. I know it's going to put strain on on good people and good families who just got caught up in the market. But if they can hang on, then I think it really bleeds into the investors who, no offense, you should get punished if you're not prepared for higher interest rates, if you're not prepared for negative cash flow, right? It's like all these pre-con projects, right? If I went online and I bought a call option on Tesla and Tesla was trading at $400 and then I had a call option, I was bullish on the stock and now it's at 140 or something trading along that. I lose it all automatically,
Hmm.
right? I lost the call option. And that's what pre-con is. Pre-con is a call option into the future. And when you
Well,
fail at that call option and the trade goes against you, you lose your deposit, you lose your investment, aka your deposit. So, anyways, I don't really have a
yeah, no,
question.
you know what? And you're right. But the thing about, like, people are buying these stocks and assets, and Nvidia or whatever, and they look at the profit to earnings ratio, and it doesn't make sense, but they're like, well, that's the way the world is now, and they just do it, right? And they don't actually do the research. So it's speculative there too, right? And I understand, like, things like Nvidia with AI and all this stuff, like it has the potential, but real estate in Canada doesn't have the potential because the income level, it's a necessity, not a speculative asset that you can just, that people from around the world are going to pile into one day and say, whoa, well, look at real estate, it's great, and we can just purchase it and it's going to go up in value and forever. It's not the case, because the economy will crack, like you said, when, well, you didn't say it will crack, but when it's all in on one asset and that asset fails, or it's propping everything else up. It's so sensitive to it, and this is what's happening, and we're going to see it. Like, I just don't see how we don't see a correction at this point. Like, there's you can, the only argument against it is immigration. And it's like, okay, that's a weak argument because that doesn't address affordability or supporting income levels or anything like that. It's just a number. So this is saying, well, people are going to be so desperate that we're going to have 15 people in each house. And this is what's going to keep the house prices high. So yes, if we have 15 people in each house, which, say 3, 4 families in each single family house in Canada, then the prices will be like a $1.5 million, on average. But it's not going to happen. Like,
No, it's
especially
it.
people come to Canada to have a more space, not to be cramped in like an apartment, like, in some highly densified place in the Middle East or somewhere, or in, India or something. The Indians come here. Most of actually the people, the new buyers, first time buyers I meet are from India, young Indian, professionals. They have good educations, good jobs, and they're all in like IT or something. But yeah, they're making good money, but they're not looking to pile in a house in a highly populated area. They want, their space. This is what they're buying. This is the Canadian dream. If not, they'll leave. It's not worth it, right?
Yeah, I think the more technology advances, the more opportunities people have to be, digital nomads. And I heard this saying a long time ago, and I always thought about it, is that money flows where it's treated best. And I think that's where people flow too, is where their money's treated best and where they're treated best in terms of healthcare, in terms of just little things, right? Like if I don't have a family doctor right now because mine retired, now like am I like all in on a doctor because I have
Mine
health
too.
issues? No. Yeah, like I'm 30. I'm relatively healthy. I haven't seen a doctor in a long time. I get my blood work done, just to, little things
Yeah.
like that. and
Yeah, I'm the
and
same.
when I get my blood work done, I hire someone online through Rocket Doctor to look it up because I don't have the patience to go sit in a doctor's office or try and get an appointment 6 months from now. So yeah, I guess the whole point is that I think that with tax, like I paid tax for since 2016 when I first started working. Don't shoot me. I was in school. I'm only so old. So, but every year I feel like my tax bracket has gone up because I've improved. But also the amount of tax that I'm paying, it feels like I'm getting less and less services for the tax, right? Like roads are terrible. I live in Toronto. The gardeners, it like what they're doing is just you can't
Oh
even wrap
yeah.
your head around it. Healthcare is bad. There's just you're not getting as much services now. If people were getting a lot for their tax dollars and property tax and things like that, you would feel okay to pay that tax. But now, taxes have just gone up, and it's not just tax on income; it's tax, the carbon tax. Like Pierre Polyev always beats this drum, but you tax the farmer, you tax the driver
Yeah.
who brings it, then the grocery stores have to upcharge, which ultimately comes back to you as the consumer. Like they're not taking a hit on their profit margins; they're passing it on to you. So my long-winded point here is that with people being flexible, and I think about 400,000 Canadians left, like Canadian-born citizens left the country last year. Now, if we
Hmm.
have that continue, and then we have immigration slow down, foreign students, all these diploma mills getting shut down. What I studied, and I'm reading a book right now, is just studying Japan and their real estate cycle and how real estate is so cheap there because their birth rate has declined so much, their population has declined so much, and their supply of homes has just over time gone up. So I
Hmm.
wonder if Canada kind of becomes this new Japan where uh, it's not going to happen tomorrow, 5, 10 years from now, maybe, as prices come down, like you're expecting in terms of a recession, that home prices can become affordable, but opportunity won't be as good in this country. Unless I don't know what you think about politics. I know you don't really want to talk about it too much, but do you think the conservatives could make a huge difference to what we've seen in the last almost decade of Justin Trudeau?
I love actually talking about politics, but
Okay,
it's
cool.
such a divisive issue that
Yeah, it's tough.
and I it's you know what it's there's a lot of, I believe most of us are very closer to neutral on our views. Even me, like you could see and say I'm a far right, you could classify me as that, but I'm not. I'm like central, centrist kind of person. And I think the majority of Canadians are. We do have those extreme ones on either side. And of course, the people in the center then have to choose between those extremists. But most of the people, if you didn't give them a choice, they would get along and they wouldn't really care. I think we need, you know, the people are most productive, and I'm just talking about from my own point of view here, and this is kind of my own, I don't know, way of that I've analyzed, and I come to realize when you're not, fighting for survival, like, we're here to survive as human beings. We're here to survive and procreate. That's the only reason we're born, and that's the only reason our point of life. And I tell my kids this all the time. So survival, if you have no survival instinct or no need to survive, you're not going to produce anything. You're going to sit there like a sack of shit and do nothing. And this is what we've kind of been given with. Here's some debt. You're like, nobody, okay, maybe they do because of the food banks, but food bank usage can, I guess, say that they would go hungry and they're going to the food banks. But a lot of the food bank people just want to pay for it, right? You see the stories, and they're like making 80,000 a year and they're going to the food bank to save some money on food. But humans need to feel like they have to survive, and it's good. But the government tries to fight that by giving all these services and giving all these things. So yeah, like when we change, it will help, but they need to be tough, and they need to be, make unpopular decisions. Like the guy in Argentina or whatever, like he's like, department of this gone, department of that. Like that's what you need. You need to cut expenses. Like in my house, we need to cut expenses because so much goes to waste. We don't need every streaming service, right? We just need one at a time. We can only watch one at a time. Most of them sit there not being watched. So you need to cut all this excess expenses that you have in your budget, and just get rid of them. And this is what the hard thing's going to be for the government, because you have, these socialist style governments, or, politicians that everybody wants free this and free dental care and free and $10 a day childcare. And it's all BS, because the reality is the waiting list for $10 a day childcare is like so long, it's going to take you years. And the dental care is for like seniors, and it's like crap. Um, so we need to cut all these unnecessary expenses, all these government employees that they've hired. Like there's way too many. Sorry if you're a government employee, but like you just don't produce. You don't need to produce when it's. I see people that they used to get a job at like the region, like, and it was like it's like they're retired, like, yeah, working at the region here, and it's like they've just won the lottery or something, like, like, because you're getting paid, you get your paycheck, you get your salary. Everyone should be self-employed, actually, and then we'd be very productive as a
Yeah,
country.
yeah, you would be productive.
But yeah, I think that people need to feel those survival instincts in order to be productive, right? Like being self-employed, being a realtor is great, you know, 'cause- and it's tough because some of them, they're going to be the one trying to sell you a house when you don't need to, but on the other side, it's like you need to get out there and work. You need to get out and say and get out of your comfort zone and do things. If I was just getting paid a salary right now, and it didn't matter if I sold homes or not, I'd be like, I wouldn't even care. I'd like, you
No.
know, don't buy. I don't care. Like,
Yeah,
but
I'm
I
getting
get
this.
even,
I'm getting the same check at the end of the day. It doesn't
yeah,
matter.
who cares, right? And if I worked for the government, I'm like, like I work for the government here. Like, yeah, what do you want me to do? You want me to come to the office? Like, what are you, crazy? This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
This is insane. You want me to actually leave my house? And this is where we're at now with society, right? So yeah, they need to feel pain, um, and they need to. I'm not talking physical pain, but pain, like financial pain, and that will the most productive I've ever been, prior to being a realtor, or even when I was a realtor, is when I get fired or something happens, somebody rips you off for a bunch of money. I'm like, you know what? I just lost so much money on some stocks or whatever. I'm gonna go work. I'm gonna make 3 times that much now just to make, and that's the best, right? You have to have failures, but the government doesn't want anyone to fail. No one's gonna hurt. No one's gonna starve. Just give it to you, right? Give everybody everything, and that's bad for society. And it's like again, it's the socialist mentality where there's been like, I mean, you've probably read them, where high school teachers, they go in and they say, okay, everyone's getting the same mark,
Yeah.
regardless of what you do, and then
Participation medals.
yeah, and then it's like, well, they're like, well, we're doing more work than them. That's not fair, but we want good marks, but we have to do all the work. And these guys are like getting an average mark, and they're not doing anything. Well, yeah, that's socialism, right? Like
Mm,
people need to work. Where was it? My wife, she was reading something it was years ago, and it was like Switzerland or Sweden. they actually taxed the lower income brackets more. so, so you didn't want to be in it, right? So
You
you're
didn't want
like,
to
you know
be in
what?
it. Oh my
I don't
God.
want to be
Yeah.
in this. I got to work harder. I got to go do some,
Yeah.
and it worked, right? So now
Yeah.
we're like, oh, you make less. Now they're incentivizing you, and I think Pierre Polyev says it all the time. It's like, why would you work more? Because you get taxed more. That single mother, whatever, she gets taxed 90 cents on whatever dollar she makes over 50,000. They should be incentivizing, or yeah, they should be rewarding hard work, right?
I
It's
think
always,
we're,
it's
yeah, rewarding hard work is big,
yeah,
and rewarding children needs to happen in this country too.
yeah.
Like the one thing you said was procreate, right? How the hell
Hmm.
are you supposed to procreate today? Like I don't know about your boys, but the average house in Oakville where I grew up, which where I'd love to be one day, is I think it's 1.7 million. It's bananas. So I was listening to someone talk about this, and if you were a mom and or you had 4 kids, I think it was Hungary or somewhere. If you had
Yeah,
four kids, you never paid income tax again in your
yeah.
life. That's a
The
pretty
government,
good incentive.
the government of Canada, like literally, like they should say, you have 3 kids, you get one of these BS 3.9, 3.8 million homes are going to build, which are not going to build, but
Yeah.
you get, this is what you get. You have three
Yeah.
kids, you get, because you're actually producing something. You're producing people, right? And it's about producing something, not the opposite of just consuming, right? That's
Everything in life is an incentive. And
yeah.
go back to your Argentina point, inflation there was 300%, and he got it down to 11%. And he had the first budget surplus in like
Hmm.
a decade or something like that. So yeah, if they're, if you're voting, I guess this guy would be considered right wing, but I just think he's economically
He's not
responsible.
right wing though. It just they just
Yeah.
call him because he's like a little bit to the right, so they're like he's a
Yeah.
right winger. But
He
he's
wants to
not like
fire people who aren't
yeah.
working hard. That's not right wing. That's
They right wing. They like to say, well, right wing is like the KKK, and that's what they say. Like this is like extreme far right, crap that nobody wants. I don't. Nobody wants to be that. But as soon as you're like a little bit on the right, you're classified the same. And again, this is my point: is most people aren't. Most people are just near the center somewhere. They're leaning one way or another, but they're painted as these far leftists or far right.
I
And
think you and I would be in the same boat. Like when people ask me, like, what's your stance on politics or whatever, and I'm like, look, my main concern is economics. It's deficits. It's the high cost of housing. It's
mhm,
GDP. The other kind of stuff. It doesn't interest me, and I don't think that's wrong. To be honest, I just think it's everyone has different interests and motives, and maybe they have different fights that they want to fight, and for me it's just, and I think people listening to this show are, it's just economic, it's just basic economics. If you spend more than you make, you're going to be in trouble. And if
mhm,
Canada was a company, it would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. And the only big companies that Canada is creating, like, in my head, is what, Shopify, and even they're pissed about the capital gains tax. And you're just not incentivizing people to come here. And people who say, well, good, Shopify should pay more, but no, they should pay less, because think of how many jobs they've created. Think of how much they've done for the economy, how much market cap they've created if you were an investor. And then when you start thinking about productivity, you stop thinking about taxation so much. You start
mhm,
thinking, oh, wow,
mhm.
you're creating, and taxation does not create. You're just taking from people who work hard for that dollar. And then eventually, like you just said, they stop working as hard, because why? Why would you work harder? It's just, you're just going
Well,
to give it to someone who's not going to use it properly.
even now, why would young people work? Like I don't even know why these people have jobs. Like you're not getting anything. You can't buy a house. Like when I bought a house, it was, do I want to buy a house or not? Yeah, I'll buy a house. All right, just save up a few thousand, buy a house. It was a choice. Now it's like not going to happen. Like kids, forget about it. I would like if I was young, I would probably just go and travel around the world. Like a lot of people in Ireland and stuff, they do that. They travel Europe, buy a van, live, travel around or whatever the case may be. That's what I would do. I wouldn't be producing because I'm not going to be rewarded. I'm
Yeah,
literally
no.
like living in the matrix. I got to go to work every day, live in an apartment. Like, I could probably live in an apartment in Toronto. That's the thing to do. But where I'm
Yeah.
from, like, we don't like apartments.
Yeah,
It's like for
no,
retired people or something.
it's
Yeah.
funny because like my condo is stunning. It's so nice.
Yeah. I know. I know.
I
They're
love
nice
it.
up there.
I love it. And it's I have a great little like patios. I don't have to cut the grass or anything like that. But
Yeah.
like it's funny, like I have older friends from the gym, and that they've done so well for themselves or whatever. And I always get made fun of. You got all these older friends. Well, really, because like I see how successful they are, so I want to get to that point myself. But they always
Hmm.
talk about condos. I could never do it. You know, I would, you know, like, I wouldn't survive. I'm like, what do you think? The wall's gonna fall in on you? You go to the kitchen, you cook, you go to your bed, you sleep, and you
No,
sit in
I
the living
could,
room, watch TV.
yeah, I
But
could live in it. I just,
mm,
yeah, like just for like, I don't know. I think I like just having like the house, a little piece of land, like
yeah,
garage, and just yeah, you just got to cut the grass and whatever. But
it's not a
I
big
just the way I
deal.
was brought up. Like I would probably prefer to live like in the country than in the city, right? I'm kind of in a
Yeah,
suburban, whatever, but in between,
you're a
best
Niagara
of
guy.
both worlds. Yeah, Niagara,
Yeah,
Niagara's, yeah, it's it's a little out there, but
yeah,
we had nothing besides the tourist industry up until, whatever. And now it's like you're either a teacher or, or a firefighter or something. Like there's no real industry in Niagara that
yeah.
pays anyway. It's tourist industry. So
And the average house is 550, 600 there.
no, it's the average residential property for all types is 650, 675 right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Higher than I thought.
Actually, some more. Yeah, it's 675 at least. Yeah, it.
Yeah.
But again, it's like when I like I know all these numbers, but it fluctuates so much. We go up a
Yeah.
100,000 in 2-3 months, just like Toronto does too. But like Niagara, this is like
Unheard
not
of.
normal, right? It's
Yeah.
but yeah, like you can save 100 grand if you wait until the summer to buy. Because I
Yeah.
always tell people like wait until the summer,
Wait, I
just
always
wait a
say
few
that too.
months.
I'm like, at Christmas, I'm like, don't get distracted. Just keep pushing because you're gonna find
Yeah.
something that, and it's gonna be a deal. And everyone waits till January, prices go up, and it's crazy. But an hour's flown by here, so I've really enjoyed
Yeah.
this conversation. But I wanted to ask you, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I wanted to ask you a question here. I always
Hmm.
wonder, your business, how have you grown it when you say the stuff you say? Do people still want to work with you? Um, I find that with my business and what I say and what I put out there, people resonate with it, so they want to work with me. Like
Hmm.
they, when I get called in, most of the time it's like they know me before I've even
Hmm.
gone in the door. If that makes sense, I'm not the
Hmm.
most bullish person, and I think people resonate with that. They resonate with someone who says, you need to buy tomorrow versus someone that says, look, take your time, sleep on it. This is what I would
Hmm.
do. They enjoy that kind of calm mentality. So I'm just wondering, with the content that you create, are people reaching out through you through YouTube? I guess just for the realtors that watch this channel, like what really drives your business?
So I've talked to realtors that I know, and I've said, look, like, and they agree with me. Like, they're like, I agree. And I talk to realtors that like, I try not to go to the board meetings and stuff. Like,
Me
nothing
neither.
against my board or whatever, but it's, I don't know, it's just annoying. But then
The tire
I
pumpers.
just don't like hanging out with realtors either, right? Usually,
Yes.
for the most part, like, so it's just that competitiveness, and everyone's already sold 3 houses that week and whatever. But and then I see that they say, "Oh yeah, no, I watch your channel, right?" Because I you don't know who these people are because you never meet them in person anymore, right?
Hmm.
And they say, "I watch your channel." I'm like, "Oh boy, like what do you think?" And they're like, "No, I agree with everything you say. That's great." And I'm like, "No, no, really." They're like, "Yeah, yeah." And I talk to friends that are realtors in different cities, and I'm like, "Yeah, you should like do it." And no, I could never. My clients, if they saw that, they would never. I'm like, I'm not like. It's just you're just talking about the honest, like the truth and the reality, and so. But yeah, I guess it always leans towards people thinking about the sellers, right? They're always thinking about because the listings are the most important thing.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, no, it's you know what, it's honest, and people reach out to me because you know what I would say some sellers reach out to me too, but it's mostly buyers that would reach out to me through my YouTube connections and Twitter and stuff. But the sellers like they don't care, like if they I guess if they do know me and they don't call me, I would never know, right? But yeah, I don't think it affects my business. It positively impacts my business. But I do it because I can. Like people say, "What do because I can, because I care. Like I'm not doing it to get business. I'm like, this is not my ploy to get business. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get business where no one else will, because no one else would talk like this. It's like, no, I'm doing it because I'm in a position where I can. I've done real estate for 20 years, and I'm just like, you know what? Like, maybe I need a change. But
Yeah.
instead of just quitting real estate, I'm like, no, I need a change. But nothing's changed with me. I work with families, and this is what I continue to work with families. Um, so I'm just calling it out. And people like when you call it out. And I hopefully one day I won't have to. Hopefully I can be convincing. You should be buying. Like, Now, like this is the
Yeah,
time to
yeah.
buy, right? And
I
it's
hope so too. I hope that when I look at rents and I look
yeah.
at the average mortgage payment, I'm going to say you should buy and this is why, and back it up with data, because I think we started this podcast a year ago, and I just I started helping people that had such bad experiences with people. Like I
Hmm.
just helped someone sell at a huge loss, and I thought it was going to be really hard. And they texted me and said, "We've never had a better experience with somebody." And you don't, in real estate, you don't hear that a lot.
Hmm.
And they just said, because of how truthful you were, what you told us that you would do in this situation, and how you told us that we need to discuss it and make that
Hmm.
ultimate decision. I think there's too many. When they went to buy their place, it was at the peak of the market, and their realtor just told them, you should pay whatever your max is, rather than, like, she's like, he never sent us a comparable. He never sent us, what something sold for last week. We were so over our heads, and it was just shit service, just to be frank. And
The
that's what I want to save
stories,
people from. I want to save
yeah.
people from crappy 3-star experiences where someone makes 20 grand on a check and they didn't deserve it.
I've heard so many stories from people that have reached out to me, sellers, and they're and over their heads, and their realtor told them buy these condo, buy this pre three of them they bought, and they're upside down on them all, and I'm just like,
Could you
and
imagine?
and they're just it was just like blindly like just buy them, who cares, it's going to go up, like there was no thought to it, and they listened to the realtor too, so they're to blame too for just blindly
Yeah.
listening to someone, but again they were trusting in this person, right? And that's the thing. Like even nowadays, like if you're buying through many buyers I have, I tell you, like there's a good chance this is going to be lower. Like it's going to be less in a year, right? So just be prepared. And as long as you're honest with them, like they want to buy, I can afford the payment, whatever their reason is. But just be prepared that it may and will go down, in my opinions. And you know what? As long as I can say that, and they can come back to me and in a year or two because or whatever need to sell it for whatever reason, at least they know that I forewarned them about
You
it,
told them. Yeah.
and and that's it. So, but yeah, the other ones that, and I tell I put it on there, like I try to like poke, right, push buttons. I say like, if you are a realtor and your clients are coming back to you and their house is worth less and you didn't like forewarn them about it, like you got a problem. Like
Yeah.
I can sleep at night. Like not one person I've sold a house to through this whole run up, I could say that I would come back and I would feel guilty. Like, and
Mhm.
that's what's important to me, right? Because I've been through it the last time, and I'm like, and it wasn't there was no speculation then. It was just people that families and they come back and it was like 5 grand they were down, right? It was like nothing back in like '09 and stuff. But I was
Yeah.
I felt bad. I'm like, God, geez, this is bad. Geez, I sold you this house, and now these people are down like 200 grand.
Oh my
And the
God.
realtor's like,
In
God,
a
shit,
year.
don't worry, it'll go back. And they're telling him, don't worry, it's gonna go back up. Just wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait. And they're
Wait. Yeah.
what are you gonna say as a realtor? No, no, you should take your loss. Now they're all they have to say is no, just wait. It's gonna go, it'll go back up. Don't worry, the immigration, it's gonna go back up. So they're
Yeah.
they're saying this to
Immigration.
protect their own
Yeah.
asses. They don't even believe it. They're just like, oh
No,
shit, what
no.
do I
Yeah.
what do I tell these people?
They'd
Like
ignore the phone call. Do you have a big team, or or is it just you?
it's me and Anya that works directly with me. There's other agents that work under my name, but I don't. I say under my name because I don't even have an office. I work from home. But I, they joined knowing that like I don't manage you. I don't want anything to do with you. You run your own business,
Right.
and yeah, you can do it. But I don't recruit, and I refuse people all the time.
So
But
you have a brokerage.
yeah, it's my own
Oh,
brokerage.
quicker. Very cool.
So yeah, it's me and Anya. She works directly with me, but that's it. Me and my wife, she's my admin, so she does the deal processing and stuff. So I guess
Nice.
there's a
Nice.
small team of three of us, and then there's some other people that do their own thing that I don't get involved with.
That's actually like my business proposition to a lot of people, because I've worked on two big teams, one other big team, and it is just the most watered down BS business model and service I've ever seen. Is just because, the top person just getting volume,
Yeah,
volume, volume. And
yeah, it's a
you think you're hiring the best of the best. And don't get me wrong, they're amazing agents. But
hmm
what they do is they put a second year on your file. Hey, you're going to go out with
hmm
this person. They just got their license. They'll hire anybody. And they
the
just
clients and numbers in those teams. That's the problem.
exactly. It's a
Yeah.
numbers game. So when I go in there, and I'm sure you go in there and you just say, hey, we've had there's a big agent, I could say his name, but I won't, in Niagara. We had him in, he told us that he sold 500 houses last year. How many did you sell?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you know what? I sold say 40 or 50, and
Hmm.
you get me throughout the whole process. That's my big selling point. Like, you text me, I text you back. You call me, I call you back. I'm not giving you a junior agent. You get me, you get my experience. And that's the thing. When you go work with these big teams, it's a revolving door. Ask the person how many people they've had on their team in the last 5 years, and that'll tell you the truth about their business. I know
Yeah,
one
it's,
team that doesn't have a revolving door,
oh yeah, teams are
and
the worst.
they're the worst. And the only reason why it's not a revolving door is because the two head of the team, one's my really good friend, tons of respect for them. They build their agents up.
Hmm.
That's what they do. They focus on that. And that's the only reason why that team is so successful and they have such a good retention rate, is because of that. But yeah, hire niche. If you're looking to sell, hire niche people who don't have big teams, because the big teams are not, they're going to give you watered down, terrible service and promise you
Yeah.
the world and their Instagram ads and all that. And truth
And they're,
is,
well, even your point of contact's going to be making 25% of what they should be, right? So
yeah.
like it's like the Walmart effect or something, or
Yeah.
Amazon, right? It's, I don't know. It's not, when I first started, and for the first decade, there was no teams. The only
Mhm.
team you'd see would be like, oh, someone's daughter joined, and they're like, oh, that's a team. Wow. That's pretty cool. Oh, their daughter joined. And now it's just like teams everywhere. But I think they're going away slowly. So
Yeah, the service is terrible. It
yeah.
truly is. And that's, a big thing why I started my own thing, was because I started making content like this and the team got pissed. You're
Hmm.
not bullish enough. You're scaring people
Oh,
away. And why is our brand not on it? And I just said, you know what? And honestly, my business has never been better because I just started speaking my truth and putting myself out there. And yeah, is there some hateful comments that, I want to respond to? 100%, but there's more good than bad. So that's all that matters.
so you service Toronto and
Yeah, so
GTA,
it's
or
it's it's like the GTHA, I call it. My partner who does the
yep.
podcast with me, she's big in Hamilton, and I actually am not huge in Toronto, to be honest. I'm more of like an Oakville Burlington boy, but just living
Hmm.
down here, I've just met a lot of people, and they wanted to work with me. And when I first started selling, I would tell people, look, I don't know Toronto too well. I'll figure it out. I'm a smart guy. I'm analytical,
Yeah.
but and people just wanted to work with people they trust. So at the end of the day, that was kind of my move
Yeah, that's
into it.
cool.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, John, I can't thank you enough. This is probably the longest podcast I've done with
Oh,
someone. So
yeah, I have to chop it up.
yeah, no, it'll be straight. It'll be an hour, 10 minutes on
Do you put it
YouTube.
on
So
YouTube?
yeah, I'll put on YouTube.
Okay.
I'll tag you for sure.
Yeah, I'll rip it and just throw like a 10-15 minute on, like, I try to put a second video about it. I do my Tuesday and then I put a second. So I'll steal it from YouTube and I'll just like throw like 15-minute clip or something of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
good stuff.
If you want me to drop anything to you, I can as well. But we'll talk about that later. But anyways, man,
Yeah.
I appreciate it so much. I'll put all of John's links down in the description. You should follow his YouTube channel, even if you're bullish on real estate. It's always good to get a second opinion and try not to miss anything. Keep those blinders off. But anyways, guys, if you are on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and do the same with John's channel. And if you appreciate this content, just like it. If you want to work with us, you can book a call down below. But if you just like the free information, that's no problem as well. Anyways, guys, take care, and we will see you soon. John, I'm just going to pause this, and then
Yep.
we'll chat real quick.